Hey guys, I have a bit of a problem. I've never been a fan of EVs because I found them to be a bit difficult to own and to actually enjoy, coming from an internal combustion lover and such. But I've been driving the Volvo XC40 that you see behind me for the past week, and I gotta say, I actually really like it. The design wise, it's excellent. And especially this color, this green color, I can't remember what Volvo is calling it, but it's actually in beautiful color, and ownership is really nice as well. Why? Because I've been driving it in KL, in and around KL, going around my daily business. And I've actually kind of come to appreciate the EV from a day-to-day perspective. I'm not quite sure of a long-term ownership perspective, but on a day-to-day perspective, I like it. So what do I actually like about the XC40? Well, let's start with the exterior, since obviously we're standing outside. The design, every time I look at it, I can't find an angle that I don't like. And even though it's been in the market for a while already, it seems to have stood the test of the past couple of years really well. In a time and age where makers like Hyundai and Kia and even other car makers, BYD, are churning out some pretty impressive designs, you got to give it to Volvo to actually come up with a design that still looks good. There's no doubt about it. I can't find an ugly angle to it. And I do like the fact that even though the XC40 is the smallest car in Volvo's lineup, it's actually quite decent, because I believe that EVs are better off in an urban environment such as KL. They do really well, and since I've been driving this car for the past week, I've only had to really charge it up once. More of that later inside, once we get inside. But let me show you around the exterior of the car and what I really like it. Let's start from the front. So I really don't understand why car makers like Mercedes-Benz refuse to accept that you do need a frunk. Actually you don't, but it's actually really handy. I mean, look at it, it's clean. It's a clean design, and you get quite a decent storage space over here. I mean, it's not as great as a Tesla, but still quite decent, good enough for you to actually place your charging cables. You don't really have to. Why? Because there's a dedicated spot behind in the boot for you to place your charging cables. This then can be used, for handbags, for your laptop bags, for anything of that sort. Because if you're worried about thieves actually nicking your laptop bag, thieves are actually quite stupid, and they won't realize that the laptop bag is actually placed perhaps at the front of the car. That's just my perspective. I could be wrong. So anyway, let's check out the boot. Now, from the back, look at this. It's actually quite a decent boot space. The seats are collapsible, giving you even more boot space. But even as it is, it's good enough. My laptop bag here, as perspective of the depth of the boot, on a day-to-day basis, no issues. I suspect that even for a weekend's getaway, no dramas. And this is what I was mentioning earlier about dedicated space for your cables. There's plenty. Even if you want to put these cables up front in the front and use this for anything else that you may need to store, there's no dramas as well. And as with every other Volvo, you get these clips over here, which are actually quite handy, especially with grocery shopping or when you want to tapao stuff. Now, let's take it for a drive. Now, if you're watching this video, perhaps it's safe for me to assume that maybe you're looking at the C40 and can't decide between the XC40 and the C40. I do have to say this, that the C40 is obviously a very handsome car. Very nice design, beautiful silhouette. And between these two siblings, the XC40 and the C40 is obviously the better looking sibling. However, because of that sloping roofline at the back of the C40, you basically render the rear window almost useless, because the rear window of the C40 is actually quite small, giving it a very letterbox-like view. So it's very small, very long, very small, like a letterbox, right? And that's what's different about the XC40. The XC40 has a functional rear window, which makes it easier to look backwards on a day-to-day perspective. If you're wondering, is that really a deal breaker? No, not really. Because you have 360-degree onboard cameras. So that will make things like reversing and such easier, and it is helpful, no doubt about it. So in that perspective, it's not really a deal breaker, but it's something that you need to know because some people like better views around the car. Anyway, back to business. Driving, oh, that's a Cayman R. That's one of my favorite cars of all time. I was driving, one of my most favorite memories of my motoring career is driving the Cayman R around Sepang and going flat out on turn, what is it, 7, 8, or was it 8, 9? I can't remember. Yeah, Cayman R, one of my favorite Porsches of all time. Anyway, Volvo XC40. There's no complaints, guys. I've been driving it for a week. I actually have really come to love this car. It's a functional interior. Now, if you comparing EVs, it's 10:45 in the morning and it's raining so heavily. Anyway, when comparing EVs, I know the Volvo XC40 pure electric is expensive at 280,000 ringgit. It's not a cheap EV. And with Tesla coming into the market now, it has completely disrupted the entire EV market. And you might think that, hey, Tesla, I might as well go for Tesla. Tesla is actually, they make better cars. Better is always subjective because, I mean, I've not reviewed a Tesla yet, so I'm not really going to get into it. But let's talk about the quality of things in here. It's just well put together. There's nothing in this car that feels like it's going to fall off. There's no buzzing, no clacking, no beeping or squeaking sound. And I really like that about the Volvo. So in terms of quality, there is no complaints. Everything feels very nice, very expensive. You basically do not feel shortchanged. And then I also like the fact that the Google Assistant on board the Volvo is actually really helpful. Now I'm on the way back to return this XC40 to Volvo Malaysia. And check this out. Hey Google, show me the way to Symphony Suites. Show me the way to Symphony Suites. So, yeah, and it's also giving me the readout of how much percent of battery I'll be left with when I reach there. So, in that sense, I really like it because the entire ecosystem of this car centers around you, and it makes you feel nice. And I think, coming from the perspective of a non-EV fan or an EV skeptic, so to speak, I like how things come together. And if I were to change the view on this, I still get the map reading over here. And I pointed this out before in my other Volvo reviews. I like how there's only two modes. Either I keep it nice and simple, or I get the map readout. It doesn't try to give me too much information, you know, like the Audi MMI. I get, oh god, maybe a dozen different type of settings. Chances I may not use it, but this is functional, straightforward, no dramas, the way it should be. Besides that, there's one thing that may look cheap. It's this part over here. This is basically a feature of Volvo, particularly of the XC40, and Volvo calls it the backlit topography trim decor. So why topography? Because it looks like a map, and it's backlit. It may look cheap and useless now, like WTF, but when the sun is down and it gets dark, that's where it comes alive and it looks brilliant, like no other car. I also like the sound system. I particularly like how Volvo pays attention to the sound system of a car. The XC90 gets a 19 speaker Bowers and Wilkins sound system. The Volvo XC60 gets a 15 speaker Bowers and Wilkins system. The Volvo XC40 gets a 13 speaker Harman Kardon sound system. That is just heavenly, no complaints. I say no complaints a lot because I actually mean it. So in that sense, everything's well put together. It immerses you in the driving experience of the car. Talking about the driving experience though, the XC40 it's basically offers a typical EV driving characteristic. Like, it's quiet, it's silent, it disconnects you from the outside world, which I appreciate, because after long days of work or dealing with all the stresses of life, whatever, I like a nice quiet interior. It feels very serene, and I appreciate that. The thing that I do not like particularly about some EVs like BYD is that you get all this, elevator music going on in the background, which is supposedly there for pedestrian safety. Yes, it's a good thing, you can turn it off, but I find it annoying. Anyway, in the XC40, none of that, and it's a Volvo. They are basically synonymous with safety. I'll let you make of that what you will. But besides that, you get a 78 kilowatt hour battery and 2 electric motors, one on each axle. You get about 408 PS and 660 Newton meters of torque, which lets me do shit like this. Yeah, it's wet out there, so I don't want to do. But anyway, having twin motors basically means that this is an all-wheel drive car, so traction is basically almost guaranteed. So in that sense, powerful is definitely the name of the game. 0 to 100, I think about 5 point something, less than 6 seconds. Fast, very fun. But if you keep doing that, you deplete the battery really quickly. Talking about the battery, Volvo claims that you get a WLTP range of about 430 kilometers. And truth be told, in the week or so of driving this car, I didn't see 400 plus. At most, at even 100% SOC, state of charge, I got a range of about 350, 360 at most. So yeah, 350, 360 is still decent. For example, right now, based on my current driving character, I have a 65% state of charge. Let me see. This is not the one. So I have a 65% battery left, and according to the onboard computer, I have an estimated range of between 280 to 290 kilometers. So my driving style is consuming most of the battery power, and that's what I mean, that if you have a heavy foot, you're going to be consuming the battery quite quickly. And which takes me to my next point. The good thing about Volvos, actually almost all EVs, is that they have a driving mode called one pedal drive. If you're wondering what one pedal drive, how it works and such, I actually did a separate video on that. I'll add a link to that either on the screen or somewhere down in the description box. So one pedal drive basically allows you to drive the car using the accelerator pedal alone. So in that sense, essentially if I lift my foot off the accelerator ever so gently, it will basically recharge the car. So if you can see over here, this pedal, this meter panel over here right now, based on my throttle input, if I lift off, it's charging. If I get back on, it's using power. So in that sense, like, I'm stopping for a hump right now and I'm not using the brake pedal. I just lift off my foot from the accelerator pedal and it brings the car to a stop. So I actually really like driving the car with one pedal drive. It's just less movement of your foot. After some time, it's very intuitive. I know some friends of mine, as well as my wife, don't quite like this mode. I do enjoy it. So you can't talk about EVs without actually talking about charging. So the XC40, charging this thing with a 11 kilowatt AC charger takes about 7.5 hours. However, I did try to plug it into the 3-pin plug at my place, at my home, and I plugged it in at, if I'm not mistaken, I had about 40 or 50% if I'm not mistaken, 50% left on the battery, and I plugged it in at 7 p.m. and it reached 100% at 1 p.m. the next day. So yeah, that's quite long. So I don't have a AC charger at home. I don't have a wall plug at home. That's just a regular 3-pin plug. So I'm sure if you have a wall charger at home, that will make it easier. But if you have a DC charger, if you have access to a DC charger, I think the DC charger, hold on. DC charger with up to 150 kilowatt output, which is quite a lot. You're going to be hard done to find a DC charger with that amount of output. Volvo says that you can do 0 to 80% state of charge in about 28 minutes. So I know there's a lot of 60 kilowatt hour DC chargers around, 80 kilowatt, there are some that are 90. So basically with a DC charger, give and take in real world conditions, probably about an hour, 0 to 80% charge. Anyway, very rarely will you go down to 0%. If you're at 0%, you're basically stuck. Might as well call a tow truck. But other than that though, the ownership and the driving character of the XC40, I basically got no complaints. I mean, look at this. I'm stuck in traffic. There's heavy traffic everywhere, and I don't hear a thing, nothing. You know, there's just this slight rumbling of right at the back, some sirens wailing, that's it. And I like I like this about the XC40. It's a very nice, comfortable car to drive, engaging in the sense that it has a lot of power. It has all the onboard software that you like, things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Google Assistant is amazing. No complaints lah. The only thing is, now if you're going to go out there and get a XC40 pure electric, it costs about 280,000 ringgit. And that's the thorn on Volvo's side, because Tesla, let's get straight to the point. You can get Tesla for about 200 plus, less than 280 for sure. Of course, depending on how you spec it up, it can go over 300 as well, depending on how you spec your Model Y. But at 280,000 ringgit, if budget is no constraint and you're not bothered about the Chinese cars, and you're thinking about the XC40 as your first EV, or perhaps even your second EV, it's just amazing. I think it's a really good day-to-day runabout vehicle. I did not drive it, and I will be quite scared to drive it out of town. I know there's a lot of you that say, hey, there's plenty of chargers along the way, but have you seen that recent video of 6 cars waiting for one charger? I think it was somewhere in Ipoh, I can't remember where it was. But that just shows the reality of EV ownership if you're driving long distances. So I think EVs are really better off in an urban environment such as in KL. And if that's what you're looking for an EV for, then I think the XC40 is definitely worth a look. It's not cheap, but it does everything well. And that's what's most important if you don't want a Tesla.